Testing, testing, testing. Okay, great, thanks.
Good morning, buenos dias, and welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Church of San Antonio, especially to all of you all who survived last night's Spring Forward time warp. Our weekly worship is where we connect, share information, and inspiration. My name is Polly Noel, and I've been a member with my husband Jim since 1993. Let's acknowledge the geographic place where we are currently located, Yanaguana, the home and traditional lands of the Coahuiltecan people, the original and indigenous stewards of this land to which we all belong, now called San Antonio Bexar County in Texas. At our church, we strive to enact a universal love that binds us in mutual care and affection, especially in our work for justice for all and for our planet. Our faith is inclusive, and all means all, y'all. If you are new to us or visiting for the first time today, we welcome you to fill out a visitor's card. We'd like to get to know you and follow up with you. Wherever you are on your life's journey, we hope you will find your place with us.
Thank you, Polly, and thank you all for being here. Today's invocation asks the question, what is holy to humanists? And the response is written by David Breeden. That's B-R-E-E-D-E-N. He is the minister at the First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, possibly the most humanist congregation in our UU association, and incidentally, the home church of Reverend Nell Newton. That's where she grew up. David writes, late in his life, the philosopher Richard Rorty, a well-known atheist, was asked by an interviewer if he could define holy. Now, perhaps the questioner thought that the aging and dying Rorty would be stumped by the question or would fall into some traditional language of reverence. But Rorty was not stumped. He responded, holy is the hope that someday my remote descendants will live in a global civilization in which love is pretty much the only law. For a humanist, holy does not have to do with particular places, words, or books, or even particular ideas, which must always be under question. Holy for the humanist is a place where and when the basics of human flourishing are realized. And among these basics are the inherent worth and dignity of every person, a world community that stops the battling between clans and tribes and nations, and respect for the planet, which is our home, and our entire web of existence. So, today, we will ask, what is humanism? And now it's time for you to welcome each other and exchange greetings of peace. Please do so. Welcome. It's good to be home. And it's good to gather together. Our opening hymn today is Just as Long as I Have Breath, and it's number 6 in your gray book. You probably know the lyrics are by our own Alicia Carpenter, who died this past year, and we miss her and remember her and the half dozen or so wonderful hymns. She was an award-winning lyricist, and so let's pay attention to these words as we rise in body or spirit and allow Jaime to lead us in this. Thank you. Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I made my way, still with hope I meet each day. If I ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to life. Just as long as vision lasts, I must answer yes to truth. In my dream and in my dark, always that elusive spark. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to truth. Just as long as my heart beats, I must answer yes to love. Disappointment pierced me through, still I kept on loving you. If they ask what I did best, tell them I said yes to love. Thank you, and please be seated. It's always wonderful to have an appearance on the chancel from Mary Lou and Don Hymel. You are our chalice lighters today, and you get a ministerial introduction.
Well, thank you. I wasn't expecting that. Today's chalice lighting words are from a young adult named Frances Kojar. She calls it a chalice lighting for the dark and the light.
May we light this chalice to remind us of the power and beauty of balance and contrast. It is darkness that can make the flame of a single candle so powerful, and light that deepens our shadows in turn. A chalice flame is the meeting point, the union of the refuge, safety, and incredible beauty of darkness, and the warmth, the assurance, and the joy of light.
May this act of lighting our chalice this morning remind us that we are stronger together in all the complexities and the disagreements of relationship because we are different and because we are one.
Our anthem today is quite wordy, and though we really worked on our diction, I still think we need to read the words to you first. Although we agree we are all created equal, we believe we are each endowed at birth with unique gifts and talents that are meant to be nurtured and developed for our tenure here on earth. We are not all destined to be the best. only to use the talents we possess, and oh, how silent the world would be if the robin never sang, the lion never roared, the ocean refused to crash upon the shore. How silent the world would be. And so we agree we are all of equal value and no one is more important than the rest. Every one of us is needed for the willing contribution of the talents that each of us possess. We are not all destined to be the best, only to use the talents we possess, and oh, how silent the world would be if the robin never sang, the lion never roared, the ocean refused to crash upon the shore. How silent. So sing your song, let your radiance shine. Combine your gifts with those of mine. How lovely the world would be if we each gave our best of the talents we possess.
are called as Unitarian Universalists to build the beloved community where all are welcome as blessings. May we strive to share grace and forgiveness with ourselves and each other in the hope of becoming whole and reconciled. Each week, we affirm this promise to live and behave as a community. We know that this aim takes work, and so we are committed to live and behave as a community in covenant. Let's recite our covenant that articulates our promises and binds us together. Please read together as follows. Love is the doctrine of this church, the quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other. And now we are going to have a very special stewardship moment with Dorothy Wallace, who is currently wearing two hats as both co-chair of the Capital Campaign and Stewardship Committee.
Hi, good morning. My name is Dorothy Wallace, and I officially joined this church in the spring of 1997. 25 years ago, I was 36 years old, a promotable major in the United States Army, and had just been assigned to Fort Sam Houston in something called the Weapons of Mass Destruction Division. Do not ask me about that job. I joined this church the first day I visited. Services were in the fellowship hall then. Art Severance was the minister, and I came at the invitation of a college friend whose family attended here. I don't really remember the service or the sermon, sorry, Art, but I do remember at the end of the service, Art invited everyone to stay for tamales and beer afterward. I knew I had found my people. Those tamales and beer were left over from a party the evening before by the Capital Campaign people who were still raising money for the building that we are sitting in today. The people who were members of the church at that time had some pretty big dreams. The congregation at the time was about 200 people, most of whom are no longer with us today. But I remember their names, however, like it was yesterday. Hank Lippert, Ed Brown, Jim Brown, Ed Garrison, Trent Cheney, Nevin and Suzanne Rupp, Bryant Mock, Herb and Kay Allison, Adelaide McCrimmon and her sister Jo Larson, and many more that I don't have time to name this morning, including, but I do want to say Charles Bowden, also, who we just laid to rest on Friday. These were dreamers of the highest order, and I was privileged to know them all. I met people here who would become my lifelong friends and fellow travelers, not just on my religious journey, but the journey of my life. And that includes meeting my spouse, Lee Hampton, who was my greeter on the day that I joined the church, or came to church that first day. This has been the ultimate joy of my membership here. I do currently serve as the co-chair of both the Stewardship and the Capital Campaign committees. My involvement with Stewardship over the years has given me a great appreciation of what it takes to run a church from a financial point of view. I don't love money, but I do love what it can do in moving our church forward and into the dreams of ourselves as a religious community here in San Antonio. I currently give to this church and other organizations important to me, like some of you, NPR, KLRN, and the Animal Defense League. But they have thousands of donors supporting them. Our church only has its membership, so my contribution to the church is far more significant. The UUA Fair Share Giving Guide, which you can find online, recommends that you consider giving at least 2% of your adjusted gross income, then consider stepping that amount up to 5 or 10, even 10% over the life of your membership. As Reverend Mark pointed out in his Friday Connections, last year was the best year ever in congregational giving. And why was that? I suspect that most of us realized how important this church is to us after being locked out due to COVID. This year's stewardship goal is about $80,000 more than last year. And why is that? Because this congregation is full of dreamers, just like the one I joined in 1997. We want to really move into the mission we are called to as a congregation, and that takes people and money and a strong collective effort. There is no set amount to be a member of this church. What is required is that you realistically assess your pledge based on your income and your own personal financial circumstances. In addition to the amount you give, ask yourself when the last time was that you raised your pledge, even just a little bit. We do not require anybody to raise their pledge, but please do consider it. Another thing I would ask members to consider is not making your pledge a discretionary spending item, but make it a must-pay, like your mortgage or your rent or your car payment. Think of your pledge as just that important in your life and to the life of this congregation. This shift in thinking will impact how you consider your individual giving. And the last thing I'm going to ask people is to consider being a volunteer on the Stewardship Committee. Now, most people run the other way when they're asked that question, but you'll learn so much. More people need to be part of the team and learn how to conduct stewardship campaigns year over year. Fresh eyes and fresh ideas are essential for success. Please consider being part of next year's stewardship team. Myself, Polly, and Jim would really be happy about that. We can make our stewardship goal this year of $655,000, but we must dare to dream like our predecessors and our church ancestors did. All things are possible through the generous spirit and the spirit of generosity. Don't give until it hurts, as my friend Art Severance used to say, but pledge until it feels good.
Incidentally, Dorothy is one of only two people in our 76-year history who has served as president of this congregation twice. The other, of course, was our dearly departed Charles Bowden. As Dorothy said, we had a celebration of his life here on Friday, very well attended, both online and in person, and we have this wonderful greenery and bloomery as a gift from the family to keep on giving to this church. It's time to honor our deepest thoughts, maybe some of our deepest concerns, certainly joys and sorrows. And so I invite us to enter into our hearts. Go ahead, take a deep breath and release it. Make space around that pump in your chest and also that center of your life to be very intentional about remembering that ours is a welcoming community, a spiritual community, a sharing community, a caring community. And so may we take what we listen to and apply it more deeply into action, to see each other more clearly, to love each other more dearly, and to grow closer to each other each time we gather. So I'm going to invite you to come down the side aisles to our tables with our votive lights and light a candle and return up the center aisle to your place and savor this moment of remembrance while Jaime plays our meditation music. Each week, our Book of Joys and Sorrows is in the foyer as you come in, and some people are kind enough to write in it so we can have something to share, because most of our joys and sorrows remain in the silence of our hearts, which is a very ample place to hold them. Joyful that COVID infections are going down, and soon we will be green. That's a reference to our risk factor for Bexar County. Sorrow for the continuing invasion of Ukraine and the imminent fall of its capital and all the people who are being displaced, and so much. Sorrow for the continued illness of Pam Kirk. Joyful for all the support that we've given her. And joyful for me, who always is learning things, that a third distinguished member of our congregation also served 2 years as president. Perhaps not so readily known, because Jim Noel served 2 consecutive years. My, that went by quickly, didn't it, Jim? And finally, as a member of our COVID task force, I want to bring this up during Joys and Sorrows. I know Metro Health website for Bexar County, has a 5-level scale of risk, and actually last Tuesday, right before the task force meeting, it moved into green. Yet the task force has been observing, for these last 2 years, the website of the CDC as our primary guideline. And it didn't move into green until Friday, but it's green as well. It's low risk, Bexar County. Now, we had an announcement in What's Happening last Wednesday that indicated that we were changing our focus to masks optional, but with a very strong recommendation to wear them for your own protection and the protection of others. And I see that many of you are still very faithfully observing that, and there are almost an equal number whom I hear from regularly who are ready to drop them, you know. We are increasingly aware that we are in this already and not yet. And so, for the sake of one another and for our continued well-being, bear with us as we keep an eye on those dashboards, and when we feel comfortable that this low risk rate is here to stay, watch for another announcement, likely to be that masks are totally optional. So through those masks, whether you're wearing them or not, take a deep cleansing breath and go within for a moment. For all our joys and sorrows and concerns, may we feel deep empathy and compassion. And may the caring of our community offer a space of loving kindness and just action. Amen. Well, I get to tell the story wisdom today. Are we ready for this? I decided that what I would do, because I love poetry. Anybody else love poetry? No. I think I felt that way when I was your age, and you know, I may still feel that way. Depends on what kind of poem it is. Well, this is a poem called A House for Our Dreams by Dory Summers. We, all of us, build houses for our dreams. Maybe this is one of them. They're made of cement and wood and glass and tiles, a solid form where we see our hopes and a shelter and protection for our growth. Now this house shall be a dwelling place for courage, for integrity, and for love, created and nourished by our families, and a community that speaks of we and means all humankind. All means all, y'all. These walls shall represent the privacy and dignity of individuals, and our open doors and bright shiny windows a welcome to all people of all ages, all generations. Our windows also illuminate the light of inquiry, of questioning from outside and from within. And my prayer, like that of Dory Summers, is that all our words spoken here are born of love and energy that rekindles our hearts, and of those who dreamed this house into a reality, who worked with tools and paid the monetary price to actualize this dream. So here's the appeal. May dreaming never cease for those within who know our world to be a troubled place, but dare to struggle with imperfection toward a brighter hope, a better day. And let our memories be quick and add warmth and a heritage, a quilted patchwork stitched with our history of kindliness and the daring for the good, of funny moments, jokes, and smiles, and sad times too, with their cleansing tears. This is a precious place, as is every home, that shelters those who love and strive and share. Its blessing is in lives that meet within, in living, learning, caring, and the love that is sheltered here. May it be so. Let's sing our children out. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the power of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go. Have fun. Those, my friends, are our future. And we still have a future here. As the ushers prepare to take this morning's offering, may each of us look not just into our bank accounts to see how much we have. Let's also look into our hearts and see what's available there, and how much love, how much generosity, how much trust, how much gratitude, how much hope we have. And let's take our offering today from that account. Let's give until it feels good. Today's offering is for our church, with a respectful reminder of our pledge drive, and so we will have a little pledge station outside so that you can fill out your pledge form if you haven't yet, or make a contribution there. Send it to Kathy McFarland in our office, especially for those of you viewing online. I invite the ushers to please come forward while we enjoy this traditional Irish song by a kind of a traditional Irish guy with a beautiful Irish voice, Rob Mahon.
Come by the hills to the land where fancy is free, and stand where the peaks meet the skies and the lochs meet the sea, where the rivers run clear and the bracken is gold in the sun, and the cares of tomorrow can wait till this day is done. Come by the hills to the land where life is a song, and stand where the birds fill the air with their joy all day long, where the trees sway in time and even the wind sings in tune, and the cares of tomorrow can wait till this day is done. Come by the hills to the land where legend remains. The stories of old fill the heart and make yet come again, where the past has been lost and the future is still to be won, and the cares of tomorrow can wait till this day is done, and the cares of tomorrow can wait till this day is done.
We bless these offerings we have received for our church and its many mysteries, ministries, and activities. May our blessings be multiplied through our sharing of them. Amen. Thank you, ushers. And thank you, Rob and Jaime. We are so blessed. But I don't know how humanistic that is, so let's take a look at what that's all about, huh? What is humanism? Though it has its roots going back to early Christianity, Unitarian Universalism as an organized movement on our North American continent comes from two particular religious traditions, Unitarianism and Universalism, which consolidated in 1961 to form the Unitarian Universalist Association. Though both Unitarians and Universalists have conceived and practiced their faith in individual and original ways, certain themes emerge from our story having to do with a distinct rise in religious humanism. Freedom of thought, non-creedalism, ongoing revelation, and principles of humanism, and we'll examine each of these today. Let's begin with a brief overview of the history of humanism. Humanism dates from Greek and Roman antiquity, and it flourished during the European Renaissance in the arts and literature, and expanded more widely into philosophic and theological movements in the Europe and the US in the mid-1800s, and again in the 20th century, particularly in the decades of the 20s and 30s. But it still persists today. Humanist philosophy first surfaces in historical records in 500 before the Common Era, in ancient Greece, which, not so incidentally, was also the birthplace of democracy. Why would democracy be considered humanist? Because it confers power on everyday people, trusting them to make decisions about things that affect their lives. Humanism does not expect consciousness or meaning beyond its lifetime, that is, after death. Humanists do not believe in a later reward, as in heaven, or punishment, as in hell, or another chance to get things right, as in reincarnation. Humanism supports people doing everything they can to make this life all that it can be. It appears in history in virtually every field. Humanist authors, scientists, theologians, philosophers, poets. Frequently, humanists were seen as enemies of religion and therefore persecuted. But in European Renaissance, the 14th through 17th centuries, there was a strong intellectual humanist movement. And this led directly to the Age of Enlightenment, also called the Age of Reason or Rationalism, 1650 to 1800. And the humanist movement contributed to bursts of religious activity during that time, including the Protestant Reformation. So a lot of this moved over to the New World, and there was an opportunity for humanist revolution, literally. Humanism was the guiding philosophy behind the American Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. And as democracy spread throughout the world, so has humanism. And humanist philosophy has contributed to the fundamental changes in nearly all civilized societies, including the abolition of the death penalty, nearly worldwide, but not in the U.S. yet, and the gradual dismantling of the caste system in India. Now, some of you know the Reverend Bill Schultz, who has spoken to us here in this sanctuary, a former president of our Unitarian Universalist Association, of Amnesty International, and of our Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. Bill is a humanist, and he writes, "A religious humanism is not just a matter of historical curiosity, at least as far as UUs are concerned. After all, 46% of UUs reported in the last poll that was taken in 1998 that they regarded themselves as humanists, more than twice the number of the second highest nature-centered spirituality, and far more than the 13% of UUs who called themselves theists, that is, they have a belief in a personal God, and 9.5% who describe themselves solidly as Christians. And even those Unitarian Universalists who do not identify with the humanist category would be foolish not to realize that they too should pay it tribute, for it provides a set of values that are due honor to this day." Unquote. So let's look briefly at freedom of thought, or non-creedalism. Both Unitarians and Universalists resisted and challenged codified beliefs. Initially, North American Unitarianism developed within what was called the Standing Order of Churches, something that was happening in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts from the direct descendants of Puritans and Pilgrims, from which we hail. Some ministers started to preach about the ability of people to become more like God, and cited Jesus as an example, and emphasized that more than his Savior, his being the Savior. And more Orthodox ministers and church members interpreted this new movement as a violation of creeds, and they worked to exclude this new way of thinking and those who promoted it. But those heretics solidly became Unitarians and refused to leave these congregations, and many a battle was pitched, usually over the calling of one of these unorthodox ministers to a more staid church within the standing order of churches in Massachusetts. Well, the Orthodox lost, and they left their churches. And many New England towns now feature two churches around the square: a Unitarian church, which often was the inheritor of the building of the former church because they got these ministers that were more progressive, and nearby a congregational church. Now today, congregational churches, the direct descendants of Puritans and Pilgrims, are called the United Church of Christ, or UCC, or as Unitarians like to joke, Unitarians considering Christ. So that circumstance of the division of Unitarians and Congregational, which eventually became UCC, goes back to a tumultuous time beginning in the early 19th century. Ironically, Unitarians are labeled Unitarian for their idea of God. God is one, not Trinitarian, but a single God, which is not generally central to our thinking now, but what is central to Unitarian thinking is the concept that human beings have more divine characteristics than depraved characteristics. Hence, our principles outline all kinds of wonderful ideals to which we aspire and hopefully are living into. Now, Universalists formed around the heretical idea that God would ultimately save all people, not just those who were chosen or those who believed. They rejected the idea of hell, and they set aside a significant portion of the Nicene Creed, so much so that they eventually rejected creeds. Now, that Nicene Creed was created in the year 325 of the Common Era by a gathering of several hundred bishops of the early Christian church by Constantine at his summer home in Nicaea, Turkey. And it was his way of trying to save the Roman Empire. And also, his mother had become a Christian, so he needed to adhere to what Mama was saying about paying attention to this new movement. Now, later challenges arose in both Unitarianism and Universalism about whether it was necessary to be Christian or even to believe in God. And many Unitarians, especially those living in North America, joined a free religious association which insisted on absolute freedom of conscience, a notion which, despite arguments, prevailed. Universalists, though a bit more conventional, consistently added a conscience clause to their statements of faith, which they renewed annually, and then less annually and more seldomly, such that Universalists now basically don't have those kinds of creeds. In fact, Universalists are now Unitarian Universalists. So by the 20th century, Universalists had set aside more conventions of Christianity. One final category to look at things through is ongoing revelation. Because Unitarian Universalism supports freedom of thought and belief, it does not require a creed. We're free to look for truth in many different places. Revelation, as the word traditionally used to describe how God becomes known to human beings, instead, we adopted a way of describing truth more generally than personalizing it as God. We look in different places for truth which we think keeps emerging rather than being sealed or confined or limited to a particular book or tradition. We look more now to our personal direct experience, trusting it as much or more than words from the past. Beginning with the Transcendentalists, Unitarians began to find truth in religions other than Christianity. Emerson, for example, studied the Bhagavad Gita, a Hindu scripture. And in 1893, Jenkin Lloyd Jones, a prominent Midwestern Unitarian leader, brought the Parliament of World Religions to Chicago, hosting this expansive gathering of thousands of religious leaders from around the planet, including indigenous religious leaders from our own country here. to embrace a universal human experience. I attended the Parliament in 2015 in Salt Lake City with about 10,000 delegates. It was a breathtaking event. So, humanists and those interested in humanism, without being limited to biblical sources or authority, mostly male from clergy, women began to claim their place in religious tradition. Thus, Unitarians and Universalists became early supporters of women's rights, including suffrage, the ordination of women, the economic independence of women from their fathers and husbands. And I'm going to talk more about this in May, because I can't say enough about humanism in just one Sunday service. So come on back on May the 1st and we'll engage this more. We'll engage what we call building the beloved community, which has a lot to do with stances that early Unitarians and Universalists took to be abolitionists and against slavery, to be pro-women's rights, to be pro-science. It was Unitarian Charles Darwin who proposed the theory of evolution. Unitarians and Universalists at that time both realized that science was a source of truth, and so had little problem accepting Darwin's ideas. Even harder than Darwin's theory for many Orthodox Christians to accept was the 19th century movement of historical literal criticism of the Bible, which some of you who went to seminary like me know that that's the way most everybody is interpreting the Bible nowadays. Biblical texts were seen as products of a particular time and place, rather than something for all time. Again, Unitarians and Universalists had no problem with these ideas, and they embraced an ever-widening sphere of truth from many varieties of sources. So briefly, humanists have no sacred text. They adhere to some ideas considered the Humanist Manifesto, a 1933, 1973, and 2003 Declaration of Ideas. We'll talk about more of those next time. On May 1st, we'll explore the power of nature and the building of beloved community, in addition to some statements from the Humanist Manifesto. It's this orientation to the world that has moved humanists to become the leading edge of social change. What a lecture, huh? Now, wake up. It's time to sing, and we'll talk more soon, and I welcome your questions and ideas and feedback. Let's turn in our gray books to number 145 and have an experience of something more calming and comforting as we rise in body or spirit and sing As Tranquil Streams.
Search of truth.
Well said. Please be seated for a moment. Last week we examined more of the religious and even mystical aspects of our living tradition. This week we consider more down-to-earth teachings of humanism. These dimensions of our living faith may appear to be conflicting, and yet, as we just sang, there's a way to merge and meet. As our chalice lighting reminded us this morning, we are in a constant situation of attaining balance for all of the things that pull us in different directions. Our church is about your congregation and mine, your identities and mine, your interests and mine, all of us together agreeing that we're stronger together in a place where all means all, and that the future awaits our liberating ministry. And goodness knows the present needs us too. Let's go in peace. Thank you.